much. Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining this session. So, as mentioned, I'll be talking about how to build, innovate, and scale your fintech business without breaking the bank. So, sure, very interesting topic. Now, I know Samir was briefly mentioning in his session just now, he was sort of talking about the situation we had this year. So it was an interesting year, the last sort of 9 to 10 months, and we saw a lot of shifts and a lot of interesting things happening, and we almost had this globally coordinated system stress test where a lot of the traditional ways of accessing, so people in the office, in the city centers, accessing applications, all of a sudden had those work at home orders when the full lockdowns were implemented in each country. Now, you'll see on the screen, we've got, there's sort of like a graph with a lot of the countries globally. And as cases started growing, you would see the round trip time increasing. So access and response a lot slower. And this was purely because all of a sudden you saw people at home accessing or trying to access applications over their mobile phones, home broadband, and the networks were not typically always built for this. So where traditional network capacity should be around 50%, you all of a sudden saw this go over 80%. You saw some of the public or some companies just buy and reserve space at on public cloud to try and protect or have some resource available in case they needed it. So in effect, at one stage, IDC also said they expect all enterprises to accelerate the adoption of modern cloud-native application platforms and these distributed architectures, because that obviously helps increase your mobility across your infrastructure and reduces those constraints. The interesting thing is, if we look at what happened this year, it's not the first time we're sitting with a global sort of event that impacts the way we live, the way sort of businesses try to survive or evolve or prosper. Just over a decade ago, we had the financial crash. We also saw unemployment. We saw organizations struggling, and the ones who were able to adapt and survive thrived after. But the ones that were not agile obviously struggled and tried to grapple and keep their businesses afloat. Now, if you look at all of this I just covered, one of the key pieces here is agility. So how agile is your business? And we're going to start there before we move to sort of these other pieces that the topic sort of mentions. Now, what does agility mean to a business? So if you look at this graph, you've got a revenue axis and a time axis. And on the two, you look at, there's typically a time from identifying a business need or responding to a crisis to actually delivering that outcome or responding to it via, whatever you put together or implement. And typically that then leads to a number of business outcomes delivered, which obviously goes across into a monetary benefit for the organization. Now, obviously, what you would like to do is you'd like to, as a business, compress that time to deliver that business outcome. The more you're able to compress that, so, think about it like this. So we've seen, especially in the financial industry sector, where traditional banks have been put under pressure by the digital banks. You've had digital banks like Monzo, Revolut, and many others, N26, spin up without having any branch. So no branches. They were able to actually digitally launch, sign up millions of customers, and all of a sudden they had a bit of an unfair advantage over your traditional banks that had all the infrastructure, the branches, etc. Now, to respond to that, obviously, banks were launching mobile banking applications and any type of service. Now, all of this is obviously the way you respond. And if you can reduce that, you can be agile enough to start reducing that time to deliver new service to the market, mobile banking application, or whatever it might be. Your business outcomes delivered increases, and obviously your improvement in revenue and benefit increases over what you would have had in an organization that's maybe not as agile. So typically in the past, how organizations try to be more agile or have quicker time to market, we saw AWS launch a public cloud in 2006, and typically what this did, cloud or public cloud reset these IT expectations. So providing a way where you could go to AWS at the time, provide them with your credit card, all of a sudden you can be very quick launching your business, or getting applications spun up on their infrastructure, and you didn't have to worry about the underlying hardware or the underlying infrastructure. There was a lot of continuous innovation, fractional consumption, so you only pay for what you use, and like I mentioned, the rapid time to market. Now, if we look at that, obviously great. A lot of people initially flocked to that, but very quickly realized that not all workloads are ideal for public cloud. So reason for that, typically your predictable applications, you're obviously paying for what you're consuming, and a predictable workload or reserving a lot of space, it obviously costs a bit of money. There's data sovereignty issues, there's regulations, there's GDPR, there's all these data legislations that we have these days that means you have to keep some data in a country. You can't just push it to a data center in another country. But also public cloud is really useful for elastic workloads. So let's say we're having a lot of elections in Africa, between I think Ghana's in about 2 weeks time. And then we have a few others, Uganda, there's a few others coming up over the next few months. Now, you typically don't want to, if you see a 7 to 10 times increase in traffic on, during that period, you wouldn't want to spend 7 to 10 times the Capex or money in investing in that infrastructure for one period, let's say a month every 4 years or a month every 5 years. We also, in the next few days, we've got Black Friday and Cyber Monday around the corner. And typically, huge volumes of internet traffic, transactions being processed, etc. Again, you're not going to want to spend a lot of money for that 3 or 5 day period. But typically you would want to use, so that's for those elastic workloads that spin up and down a lot. Now, if you look at some of the research that was done, comparing the costs here, so although you now get that agility piece, there's a bit of a cost problem, and you'll look on the top right-hand corner, you'll see the, highly predictable workloads are typically, less than half the cost of running them on public cloud. And when you take mixed workloads, so typically you see around 75% of workloads are predictable. Even if you have a mix of workloads, public cloud is still a lot more expensive. It's only for those highly elastic workloads that public cloud is obviously a lot more cost efficient and beneficial. So where are we today? So we actually, at Nutanix, took a bit of a survey, or did a survey in conjunction with Vanson Byrne for a few thousand IT decision makers globally, and we found that 85% of enterprises rank hybrid cloud as the ideal operating model. 73% of organizations actually mentioned that they will be migrating applications back on-prem from public cloud. And 60% of them obviously said that security is a big factor impacting some of their cloud decision or cloud strategies. A second component, and I brought this in because I know skills specifically in the IT market is top of mind. I presented a few months ago at a CIO event where We talked about, the biggest challenges we are facing, not just globally, but in Africa, and skills was mentioned. And, again, 53% of organizations surveyed mentioned that skill availability will have the biggest impact on their future cloud computing decisions. 71% said they would move both new and existing applications onto a cloud platform in the next 3 years. So cloud platform could be on-prem, private cloud, or it could be public, so a combination of that, obviously a hybrid cloud. And then 91% of organizations mentioned investing in reskilling their IT team to keep up with these emerging technologies. So you can see a lot of pressure on the skills component. So whatever you decide to do, the one piece is you need to be agile to obviously stay ahead of the curve of competition and, to get your organization obviously where it needs to be. And the second piece is, to be able to do that, whatever decisions you make, you're probably going to have to look at the skills component as well, because that will impact what you do. Now, importantly, how do you get more agility? Now that we've covered that, how do you get more agility, but with less complexity? Let's look at that. So infrastructure, as we are today, very complex. So on the left-hand side, I'm sure many of your IT teams, CIOs, head of infrastructures, they'll be very familiar with the sort of diagram I have on the left-hand side. Very complex, a lot of interconnectivity. You've got typically only 20%. So if you look at it, I mean, the application is what makes money, the organization money. If you didn't need the application, there would be no need for the underlying infrastructure. But customers are spending 80% of their time on the infrastructure because they require specialized skills. There's integration challenges. Some of these systems are really proprietary. There's different vendors in there, and there's long planning cycles to get to market. So, it could take months, weeks to months to actually launch a new service or to upgrade to a newer version. And a lot of this obviously puts pressure on that agility piece. And if you sit back and you look at the whole situation, what if you could take that complex environment we just talked about? Why not move it, if you can simplify that into a consolidated platform, all of those pieces, a simplified platform that can run on any hardware. You've got your virtualization piece in there. So obviously the reason why organizations virtualize is sort of to create that abstraction so that you have a lot of flexibility in terms of managing and moving applications and utilizing your resources better. So what if you can consolidate all of that? You still have all your freedom of choice of hardware platforms, virtualization, hypervisors, etc. And you actually now get to focus just on the application and the data. So if we look at sort of moving that forward, we were talking about the public cloud piece, and we're talking about the rapid time to market, fractional consumption, etc., etc. And I sort of started introducing the idea now, why not bring the cloud inside? So why do you have to choose? Why do you have to choose either having bit of agility here, but you don't have the control and the security, or where you do have the security and the control in your own data center, you might not have agility and you have all this complexity and challenges. Why can't you have the best of both worlds? Environment where you've got software-defined everything, you've got self-healing systems, you don't have proprietary hardware locking you in or giving you complexity in terms of integration. Having self-service portals, allowing you to get your services quicker to market, and still having that continuous innovation and fractional IT consumption, rapid time to market. So all of those benefits, regardless of where you choose to run your applications. If we look at some of the benefits you can get by moving to a model like that, why not have, some of these pieces? It's basically a summary of what I just discussed, of being agnostic to cloud, being agnostic to hardware, and being agnostic to hypervisors, but creating an environment where you're actually focusing on your applications and making sure you can deliver those business outcomes without having the complexity or challenges that hold you back. Now, if we look at, the piece, we sort of spoke about the skills piece a little bit earlier, so almost sounds too good to be true what I'm talking about. How would you manage that? And what would it look like? So typically today, again, you would sit with multiple management screens in your environment, making it complex. You would have a database team, you would have a security team, you would have a server team, a storage team, and they would all have their own sort of tools and skill sets that they're working on. And you would have to schedule these meetings to bring everyone together to either, plan integration, plan upgrades, plan new services to market, or fault finding, where everyone's pointing fingers at each other because, they don't want the network to be blamed for the slow application response. They're saying it's the database guys say it's the network. So it's quite challenging, right? So what if you can take all of that and you can consolidate that onto a simplified single platform that you can have visibility of all your applications, your services on a global level, regardless of where they sit. So whether it's in your own data center, at a colo site, on AWS, Azure, etc., and being able to see at a snapshot how much capacity you have available, where you potentially have problems, that you can resolve, but all simplified, so no finger pointing or challenges. And in the end, it provides you with that agility piece because, you've got all of it consolidated. Now, let's take that a step further. How about introducing artificial intelligence into the operations and being able to do just-in-time forecasting? So here we talk a little bit about, we're starting to go closer into, we talked about innovating, we're talking about, sort of being smart around the spending piece. So when you look at growing your infrastructure and scaling it, so having just-in-time forecasting to see exactly how much time you have available based on historic growth, when you will need more capacity, whether it be storage, compute, or memory. And, if you as the leader, the MD, CEO, or CIO of the business went to your team and said, you know what, we need to, for example, we need to launch a new mobile banking application to compete with the digital bank that's just launched. How much capacity do we have? On that day, you can actually take whoever's providing the mobile application, you can input the requirements in here and it will show you, how that affects your entire infrastructure. And, if you have the capacity or if you don't, what you need to add. So having real intelligence in there, codeless automation and remediation, and, also automated resource optimization, where you can actually optimize your resources automatically. So you take that now to the next step, what does the cost look like? So we now, having visibility of the growth and, how it looks like and what we can do, how agile we can be. But what about the cost governance perspective? So again, imagine having a platform where you've got unified cost visibility and metering, where you can now start doing chargeback. So if you're a big group, you can start doing chargeback on specific applications to your subsidiaries. Applications or services you're providing them, you can do chargeback, or to a specific, digital division within your organization. You can also do cost optimization across your public cloud spend, or, where you can actually, so a lot of times, there's capacity that's actually being reserved or allocated, but it's unused. So having that intelligence to be able to manage that effectively. And I wanted to sort of, show the piece around just what it looks like. So we spoke about this, having visibility of the cost. So if you look at the bottom right, having that visibility in terms of, how much cost you have per hour, how much cost you have per month, and that is per application. So whether that application runs in your own data center, whether it runs on public cloud, and being able to abstract, again, the application and move it around based on, performance, based on cost. If you spin it up in public cloud, being able to hibernate it at times when it's not needed, when the application is not needed, so you don't pay for it, or actually being able to burst. So let's say you can set up rule sets for, when you reach 80% capacity, you can burst into the cloud, for additional capacity. So, a lot of intelligence, and then configuring a TCO model to accurately reflect your cloud spend. So now all of a sudden, you're not just able to respond quicker to market, you've got a lot more simplicity in terms of managing your business, your IT. And at the end of that, IT obviously, is there to help deliver on those business objectives. But you're also starting to manage the financing and the costs a lot better, which we'll talk in a little bit, in a few moments, a few slides time. I'll go through that. So now let's look at, what does it look like from a workload perspective? So traditionally, legacy environments, you had your business critical applications running on a certain stack. You had your VDI, your potential, well, especially VDI at the moment. This year we saw a lot of work from home situations. You've got your robo sites, cloud native applications, so we're seeing a lot of adoption on containerized applications. You've got your big data analytics, and you've got your databases with all your business critical information. Now, again, super complex, different silos, difficult to manage, and very costly in terms of spend. And, each time having to do these big refreshes every few years at a big cost, and then months worth of professional services and migrations and potential downtime and change control windows, etc. So again, why not bring everything together into a simplified platform where you can manage all of it, have the visibility, allow them to scale up and down, have simple upgrades without downtime, and kind of having a much less complex environment to be able to deliver a lot more efficiently on all those objectives you have as an organization. So we look at, will it break the bank? Part of the headline of the topic you're talking about. So typically, when we go out there, we almost see this, from a cloud economics perspective, it's almost like an iceberg, right? When organizations undergo this whole procurement or refresh cycle, to refresh infrastructure to support their business applications, they typically just have visibility of this top piece, the initial acquisition cost, which only on average is about 10 to 20% of the IT spend. It's all these hidden costs that eventually prop up. How much are you paying for labor? So for all these specialists, having specialists in so many different areas, the power and cooling, maintenance, DR, backup, security, support, additional professional services because of complexity in these environments, managing it, facilities. There's so many additional costs to take into consideration. So we've actually, again, looked at this whole piece and did a survey with IDC, over the last year, where typical organizations, again, by just moving from the legacy type approach and moving to a much more consolidated, simplified, what we used to call hyper-converged infrastructure, but now, it's actually a hybrid cloud infrastructure model. Organizations have found huge cost savings, so average of 62% lower cost of operations over 5 years, incredible ROIs, quick payback periods. When it comes to IT cost benefits and staff efficiencies, more efficient management, more, from a help desk perspective, a lot more efficient. So in general, really beneficial from a cost perspective as well. And if you look at the fractional consumption piece, just adding. So, it could be any hardware, but you could start small. You could start with, let's say, 3 of these consolidated platforms, and then just scale up like a proper cloud model. And whether it be on-prem, whether it be in the public cloud, whatever it might be, but again, all managed from a simplified platform. So, what does this look like? What does this agile innovation scale piece all look like? So it's all about hybrid cloud, right? It's about running your applications, being able to run them in the most efficient way with the least complexity, and running them where they're best suited. So whether it be on-prem or, like I said, in public cloud, and being able to manage everything and having this whole ecosystem of visibility, cost control, proper budgeted planning. So, and the example I use a lot of times when I talk through this is, imagine an organization that, did a hardware or infrastructure refresh last year, December, or January this year, where they normally do a 3 or 5 year cycle, and, they sort of go out on RFP, and they refresh the entire environment for 5 years. That money, obviously gets spent on day one. So imagine that amount of money. That money could be the difference. We saw a global pandemic. There's going to be, more challenges in the future. And now all of a sudden, you've spent all that money up front, but your business could be under immense pressure. You could be in the travel industry, or, in whichever industry. And that could have been the difference between surviving or, not making it through the last year, the difficult time we've had. So it's all about, keeping, obviously, the money and spending it in a proper way, so spending, using that fractional consumption method. But you can get the best of both worlds. You can get agility, you can get innovation, you can do things smart, and you can do it spending, let's say, spend, for a year. So refresh that entire infrastructure for a year, and then every year you just sort of, keep topping up or growing and scaling organically, instead of having to just spend, money and almost guessing how much you will need in 5 years' time. So, unifying these multiple clouds, having license portability, so it doesn't matter where you use it. It's portable across all environments, native integration, seamless movement between the clouds, and a single platform using the same constructs or skill sets. So, just a quick summary print there. Yeah, so true hybrid cloud architecture spans your private and public infrastructure, but operated as a single cloud. And my last slide would just be a quick summary of that. So your platform, any app, any location, and based on your spend, and the way you want to do it, what fits your business. And, with that, I want to say thank you very much. Thanks for tuning into my session. I see I'm just about on time. So I'll leave it over to the question section. Thank you very much.
Rowen, you have a question. Shall I read it out for you?
Yes, I could see. So the question is, given the drastic changes in the way of doing business, what is the best way to rapidly adopt new remote working operating models, being mindful of the possible impact on other performance indices? So, okay, so absolutely, great question. I spoke in the beginning about we had this financial crash just over a decade ago. Before that, we had 9/11. Now we have COVID. It's not going to be the last time we have challenges. And being able to, the only way to sort of get around this is to, so in this instance, specific use case is remote working, right? So if your infrastructure is not agile, if it's not easy for you to adopt a new service or, release a new service into the market, a new service doesn't have to be external facing, it can be internal facing, so VDI. So, launching virtual desktop infrastructure to your users. Now, there's obviously various ways of doing it. There's cloud models as well, which you can get in touch with. You can obviously connect with us on. But it's all about being able to, not have to guess. So we're sitting on today, we're November 2020. You might need your lockdowns might be extended. You might need your users to work remotely for the next 6 months. It might only be 6 months, So why would you sort of size an environment to support 1,000 users and then buy 3 years or 5 years? Size it for what's right for your business today. Get the right company in there to support you, and you can launch that service quick to market. We've got many customers that immediately we help them actually adopt this, and got them up and running in no time. And they also can spend as they require these services, right? So it doesn't have to be 5 years. They can, build it for a year and then evaluate, do they need to scale up? Do they need to scale down? It's a lot smarter way. It's like the manufacturing industry did the whole just in time, manufacturing, to start doing things in the supply chain industry a lot smarter. We can apply that in our industry as well. I hope that answers the question. And when it comes to performance, obviously, the last piece of that question, on the performance side, you can actually, if you plan, if there's proper planning around it, and you look at your current environment, you get the right people in, performance should be no problem either. So yeah. Priyanka, I don't know, is there any other questions? I'll wait for a minute or two. Maybe if anyone else has a question, please feel free to ask. There we go. Keeping in mind work from home environment, which is good to adopt, private or public cloud, which is easy to use and easy to adopt? Good question. So we see organizations go either of these ways. Again, typically it depends on your organization. So if you already potentially have, you've got some applications to public cloud, you might, speak to us as Nutanix, or, to help you launch a cloud type like, remote desktop or VDI type service. But again, you could also, it depends on the type of data, right? It depends on, what your users will be doing. It depends on your data regulations in your organization. So if you're a bank, you would typically, if you're going to provide sensitive data, and your users will be accessing that via obviously a secure session, you might want to do that in country. But there's a lot of decisions around it. It comes all around, your users. Will your users have connectivity at home? How will they connect? How many users do you have? Is it maybe just for consultants, so external consultants, or for your entire work staff? So there's quite a few variables to just look at. But if I can just sort of like summarize it, you can go either way, or you can go a combination. We've seen many of our customers adopt both, so both routes very successfully. So great performance, all secure, and they're able to scale it up and down as they require. So it all depends on your organization and your current setup. So I hope I answer that one. So yeah, any other questions? Any questions around any other pieces I covered around innovation, scaling, spend potentially, having smarter spending. I mean, we're going to be around. We've got a booth, so we've got a booth on the virtual platform. So, please pop in. You can also contact myself or my team. We've got teams across Africa as well. So, anytime if you don't want to ask, but you can pop it on the virtual platform. I think, Priyanka, should we wait another minute, or?
Actually, Rowen, we're out of time, so they can visit
Okay,
you
good.
in the booth.
No problem. No
Yeah.
problem.
But thank you so much for such an interesting presentation, and we thank Nutanix for being the gold sponsor for WFIS 2020 Live. Ladies and gentlemen, do ensure that you visit their booth during the networking session. You can have a one-to-one chat and also a video chat to learn more about their products.
Thank you very much. Thanks for joining, and look forward to chatting to all of you. Thank you very much.